get started, I just want to say that I feel a little bad because I know some of you are really big fans of the two movies that we're going to be focusing on today. And the truth is that their box office numbers, while by no means horrible, are not as fantastic as I think some of you would like them to be. In fact, I saw, because some Twitter accounts are posting the opening weekend, for instance, for Beyonce without any context, and I see all the responses being like, yay! But when you see it next to Taylor Swift, it's not a yay. And I have to be honest about that. But don't worry, I'm gonna give Beyonce her flowers. I just gotta keep it real. So please remember that a movie's box office, while it will affect many things about a film and those who are involved with it, it should not diminish your enjoyment of that movie. And I've had a couple of box office bombs. These aren't bombs, but that I've fallen in love with, and you just have to deal with it. All right, so hello and welcome to this week's Movie Math for the post-Thanksgiving weekend, which Hollywood has typically avoided, not only to give the Thanksgiving releases their space, but apparently because it's not a great weekend for movie-going. People just don't want to go to the movies after Thanksgiving. Isn't that weird? What did you do instead if you didn't go to the movies? Did you do holiday shopping, decorating? What were you up to this weekend instead of heading to the multiplex? Maybe you did both. But still, two outliers made the most of the wide open weekend. They were like, why are no movies opening here? And they thought Hollywood was stupid instead of maybe Hollywood had a good reason. We're going to talk about that. But was it worth it? You tell me as I tell you how it all went down. Beyonce, I said it was a bad idea to follow so closely behind Taylor Swift because comparisons would be inevitable. And unfortunately, I was correct. I think people, for the most part, though, are being very generous to Beyonce and just kind of, letting both movies have their own space, even though Taylor Swift's is so much bigger. Beyonce came in at about a quarter of Taylor Swift's debut in October. But as I also said, Taylor Swift is experiencing a career high right now, unlike anyone has ever seen, any artist in any space, and has been keeping herself in the news quite shrewdly. Her re-releasing her music herself, and then, of course, her relationship with Travis Kelce. Some have speculated, are they haters, that maybe it's a total PR play. But if it is, it's an extremely effective one. Also, I think that the Brad Pitt-Jennifer Aniston relationship kind of started out as a PR play, but they eventually got married, so you never know how these things might start and you don't know what it means for where they might end up going. All right, so Swift created a perfect storm around herself. Boy, did she. While Beyonce has been more reserved, or as her fans would say, more regal. Look, Queen Bee, on that note, can still hold her head high. She's the runner-up for her weekend for all time, although Taylor Swift was the runner-up for her month. And you can see right here, The Last Samurai is the biggest post-Thanksgiving opening ever, and look how low that number is. Beyonce and AMC did pick a bad weekend, and perhaps that's the problem of having AMC distribute your movie. AMC doesn't know the ins and outs of the release schedule, and they have a different set of priorities. They wanted to fill the hole in their schedule. They wanted a big movie to open this weekend, instead of making Beyonce their priority and having her put her best foot forward. That was a cool poster they released at the last minute, though. I was like, right there, that was worth it to some degree. AMC also didn't do Beyonce any favors with their new rules of engagement for concert movies. Oh, this was bad. Which should have been released the second weekend of Taylor Swift's film, concert movie, if audiences were indeed being such a problem. But to release the rules now, solely for Beyonce's film and her fans, is a pretty bad look, and certainly not worth the bad publicity that came with it. Speaking of bad publicity, Beyonce's red carpet look for her first premiere gave her and her team a PR headache. I think that no matter how good her intentions might have been, she obviously really hurt the feelings of some of her fans, particularly Black women who look to her to be a trailblazer in the space for them. And as someone outside of that community, I felt that she was not as recognizable as she has been in her other fantastic looks for her concert series. Even that poster, which I just mentioned. So I think that that was an issue as well. How do you feel about that? It was certainly a headline that Beyonce didn't need this weekend. And then, well, Taylor Swift, she did show up for the second London premiere after missing the first premiere. It's still, again, if you weren't, she should have been there. I know some of you were like, oh, she was across the continent. I don't care. Get on a plane. Talk to Beyonce's team about scheduling it so that it could be done. Because she could make the London premiere. She still wasn't there at the debut premiere. But I'm glad she did show up, and she did tweet about Beyonce's movie, and Taylor Swift's social media footprint is enormous. So that was very kind of her. But I think as a result, neither of Beyonce's premieres really hit on social media. So that's, we're going to talk about how everyone should go back and study Taylor Swift's for why it works so well. I think there should be also, some look as to why Beyonce, what potential mistakes were made so that she didn't blow up quite as big as Taylor Swift did. Furthermore, Beyonce's debut brings concert movies back down to earth, with Beyonce opening on par with Michael Jackson back in 2009, not adjusted for inflation, and below Justin Bieber's 2011 concert movie. Below Bieber? That's a little bit insulting. Well, AMC said it was getting a ton of calls from other musicians after Taylor Swift's amazing debut. Now one has to wonder if concert movies will still become the next big thing. But maybe they should just stick to what they always were, a nice change of pace every now and then, and a nice feather in a musician's cap. But not the front feather, like a side feather. Beyonce's film skewed 72% female, very female like Taylor Swift's, but older than Taylor Swift's, which might also be a bit of a factor, because which one can light a fire under the TikTok audience? If you step back, as I said, this is a really good case study in self-promotion. What to do, and maybe to some degree, not what to do, but what Beyonce didn't do, and maybe should have done. Because I think that Taylor Swift's not only having a career high, but it's not an accident. Taylor Swift very much she's maybe not responsible for all of it, but she certainly got the ball rolling, and I think did a good job guiding it and keeping it going. Very, very clever. I do still think, though, she's on the cusp of being overexposed, if not there already. I think she's right there. And now, what's this trying to make Blake Lively happen? A good script is going to make Blake Lively happen. Hey, I'm cheering for Blake Lively. And I think she'd be better off having Ryan Reynolds help her out because he's a marketing genius. And also a prolific producer. I think it's a mistake for Lively and her whole crew, including Ryan Reynolds, to attach themselves to Taylor just as Taylor is about to be overexposed. Be your own person, Blake Lively. Although, Blake Lively even weighed in on the Taylor Swift-Beyonce situation. And she was very funny. I thought she was clever. But again, who asked Blake Lively? All right. Back to Beyonce. Her concert, her actual concert, has still brought in over $500 million. And if that Sphere residency comes through, she'll quickly move on to the next big headline. In fact, if I were her team, I would try to close that Sphere deal ASAP to put this moderate debut for her concert movie in the rearview mirror. Let's focus on the Sphere deal. She needs something to focus on. She needs a headline in the next week or so. I think the worst thing she could do would be to go quiet. Also, she's Beyonce. Nothing's going to hurt Beyonce. She's up there with Madonna, Cher, Adele, and Rihanna. Everybody has their ups and downs. But she's a music icon for all time who only needs one name. Taylor Swift is, of course, also iconic. Don't worry, Swifties. But I would say that Taylor Swift is almost equally iconic for being a businesswoman as she is a singer. So I think that's a big part of what makes Taylor Swift, so iconic. And not just the music. Although I love, I'm a Swiftie. All right, so let's move on to the next conversation. The other outlier, it's really tough because people are so passionate about, these singers, which is great. But complicated as they trying to move into a new space, movies. The other outlier, and both of them are trying to act, by the way, I think neither one of them can act. Beyonce's a little bit better than Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift's actually a horrible actor. But that doesn't mean they can't be behind the camera. And Beyonce, by the way, directed her own movie. And I think Beyonce's actually a very good director. I enjoyed her Disney Plus movie quite a bit. By the way, one of the directors on that is directing The Color Purple. And that's phenomenal. All right, so the other outlier this weekend was Japan's Godzilla Minus One. Interestingly, hitting theaters the very same weekend that Warner Brothers debuts their first trailer for their new Godzilla movie, also co-starring Kong. And while this is the biggest opening ever for a Japanese movie in the North American marketplace, hurrah, huzzah, that's fantastic, it's still nowhere near the Hollywood openings for the franchise. So it's like not there. It's not where it needs to be. Interestingly, while all the ladies went to see Beyonce this weekend, all the men went to see Godzilla with an astounding 82% male audience and also skewing older. I guess both these movies didn't really light a fire under younger audiences, which is fascinating. Maybe their numbers would have been a little bit bigger if they had. And kudos to writer-director Takashi Yamazaki shooting his shot while he has the chance, telling the Hollywood press he would love to make a Star Wars movie, preferably one that actually gets released. He didn't say that, but his agent should. I don't think his debut is big enough to give him a movie, to be honest with you. But he can probably get a meeting with Kathleen Kennedy, particularly because he's been in the press. I think Kathleen Kennedy really needs to have on social media a picture with Yamazaki. I think that would be great for her. If I were her publicist, I'd be like, just take the meeting so I can get the picture. But even beyond that, I think he could direct a Disney Plus episode, and I think that is the most realistic way that he can actually get into Star Wars. I mean, I'm all for him saying he wants to do a movie because it maybe gets him in the room, but I think he'll settle down. Aim high so you still hit the target, and then therefore he'd do a Disney Plus episode, and then he can go from there. Although Rick Famuyiwa is still waiting on a movie, and his episodes are amazing. All right, now what second weekend drops await Beyonce and Godzilla? No big movies open this coming weekend, so they have a chance. But even Taylor Swift fell 64% in her second weekend, but then she opened much bigger. And the 60th percentile is real hot right now. It's where all the movies are crashing, with both Wish and Napoleon dropping that much in their second weekends. Yikes, nobody wanted these Thanksgiving leftovers. That's so bad. Fellow Disney turkey dinners, Ralph Breaks the Internet and Coco, in other words, also released for Thanksgiving, they fell just 55 and 46% respectively. Ooh, that Coco number is very nice. And they came off of much bigger openings. While the creatives behind Lightyear were quietly fired from Pixar after that movie didn't do well, there were no casualties at Disney Animation after Strange World was an even bigger bomb last year. Now, Jennifer Lee will never be fired from Disney Animation because she's the engine behind Frozen. Although I do feel that since a lot of people didn't like Frozen 2, maybe somebody else could be the engine. I mean, Jennifer Lee is a Disney employee. Disney owns that IP. But I do think that it's time for someone else to actually run Disney Animation. I don't think she's the right person for the job. Bob Iger says he's having tough conversations with lots of people, but maybe he just needs to replace some of them and not give them human guardrails. That's right. I'm looking at you, Kathleen Kennedy and Dave Filoni. It's like bowling for kids. Dave Filoni just stands in the gutter and goes, "At least you got one pin, Kathleen." Our audience is just waiting for both Wish and Napoleon to hit digital. To some degree, I think for sure. And again, is Napoleon going straight to Apple TV Plus? And that also, though, I think Apple TV Plus realizes it has a problem, as it was just recently announced that they might be going as part of a package deal with Paramount Plus, which I think would be good for both services. Because again, Apple TV has incredible content. But the reception to these two movies is so lukewarm at this point, I don't see them blowing up down the line. I mean, they might just do solid. That's the best I think they can hope for. And it's not like Universal's Trolls 3 is doing any better. Tough crowd out there right now. Tough crowd. Did their bid to undercut Wish end up sabotaging both movies? Maybe. Although Trolls 3 is ahead. Trolls 3, I got a screener for it because I'm an awards voter, and I thought it was a very fun movie. So I think that at the very least, it can maybe come back as a babysitting hit. You know what I'm talking about, when it eventually goes to digital and Peacock. I mean, I can see why you wouldn't want to see it in theaters, but it was a really fun watch at home. As for the rest of the top 10, the Hunger Games prequel continues to not embarrass itself, largely by standing next to all these other movies. It's like, at least I'm not those movies. But it's still far behind the original films. And I'm back to recommending a Hunger Games streaming show instead of another movie, unless they can get Jennifer Lawrence back. And she's interested, by the way. But, I mean, she was shooting down rumors that she would show up in this new movie, but she said she's game to return to Hunger Games, largely because she needs to get her career back on track. Which is funny because back in the day, she wasn't too into the Hunger Games movie once she became like a very high caliber actress. Although kudos to her. Side note, she was really clever in that even though she had a deal to return at a lower rate for the second movie, she just simply refused to show up to set until they cut her a better deal because she'd blown up so much. So good for her. That's awesome. That is boss negotiation. negotiations. Although maybe the producers are still miffed about that because they're politely telling everyone that Katniss' story is done. Is it? I think you both need each other. But Jennifer Lawrence, you don't need them. Go find another action script. Be the change that you want to see. And while Japan sits at number 3, we're getting quite the international top 10 here. India, no stranger to the North American box office, has yet another movie in the top 10. This time Animal, and it's just in 697 theaters. That's fantastic. The movie outperformed wider releases, Angel Studios' The Shift and Silent Night. So much for John Woo's comeback, although this movie really seems beneath him. I think Violent Night already took that spot. Also, it's worth noting that The Marvels, in only its 4th week of release, has already dropped out of the top 10 and is only at $200 million, a little under, worldwide. Oh my gosh, which is about how much it costs to make the movie, advertising not included. Do something, Bob! Do something! Instead of going on the worst PR tour ever, speaking of publicity. Over on streaming, let's start with Nielsen, who's back. They're back. Oh, by the way, it was Netflix that put the first Spider-Verse movie on the map and allowed it to blow up to what it is today. And Miles Morales received another warm welcome from the service as his sequel finally came here. Sony goes to digital and then they send their movies to Netflix because they don't have their own streaming service. And it did so well here, even though it was very successful on digital for months. So that's a hot property. And it looks like Suits' reign is finally coming to an end as it slipped to 3rd and is under 1,000. Also, sadly, with Matthew Perry's tragic passing on October 28th, you can see this following week, Friends shot up towards the top of the overall list as his work was remembered. It's also worth noting that with just 4 episodes, Netflix's All the Light We Cannot See got to number 6 on the overall chart. That is a big win for Mark Ruffalo and producer Sean Levy, as well as UK TV writer Stephen Knight, who wrote those episodes and created this adaptation. It topped the originals chart, where Loki, with its penultimate episode for season 2, rose to 3rd place. That's good, but it still wasn't good enough to make it onto the overall chart. Will it with the finale? We'll find out next week. Netflix is dominating this list, though, while Apple TV's The Morning Show continues to hang on with its 3rd season currently going. But again, Nielsen combines all seasons into one. Over with movies, Five Nights at Freddy's is at number 2, and you can see what the best movie ever on Peacock actually looks like. That's half of the Spider-Verse's viewership. And Hulu debuted A Haunting in Venice for Halloween, but that just barely made it into the top 10. Ooh, that's rough. Elemental is still solid, but the only Disney Plus movie on here, interestingly enough, as longtime favorites that we've seen on here week for week, for like over a year, they finally run out of steam. Again, the end of the Lin-Manuel Miranda era. And we thought Little Mermaid was going to continue it, but that just did not happen. Over on Netflix's charts, Adam Sandler continues to be a great partner for them, with his animated Leo posting a healthy debut for Thanksgiving weekend. Netflix's first Christmas movie of the season remains in 2nd place for the 2nd week in a row. And wow, speaking of Christmas movies, Netflix audiences really love The Christmas Chronicles. I see it pop up every year, even though the Kurt Russell as Santa movie came out in 2018. And here it is again, leading the pack of older holiday movies. And here are those Squid Game The Challenge numbers, just a week later, because Netflix is a little faster with their numbers. And I have to say they're surprisingly soft, considering the brand and that it dropped on a holiday weekend. I don't think they're going to do that again, especially because they're getting sued. I also saw some people make a really good observation that they did not focus on the people who became the eventual finalists for most of the series. So nobody's invested in them for the finale. So I think they maybe wanted it to be a surprise, but I think not a good surprise. I mean, you might recall from the series, you followed the finalists, at least 2 of them. All 3, all the way through. I'm excited for season 2. I hope that this reality show didn't diminish the brand at all. The Crown remains, I would say, solid. I mean, it's still going okay, but I think it makes sense that this is its final season. There are 2 comedy specials in the top 10 this week. Many of you told me last week, don't Google Matt Rife, as he is in hot water. But it's not costing him views. It's interesting to see that he was able to stay not only on the chart, but still towards the top of it. And that Mike Birbiglia one at the very bottom, I watched that one, and I thought it was pretty funny, even though it was a little morbid. So just a heads up on that. And this is actually Scott Pilgrim's second week of release, but only, well, first full week, but only its first week in the top 10. It couldn't even break into the top 10 last week. And it's pretty low down to boot. So if this is going to get a season 2, it would be based on the strong social media interactions that it had. Very strong. It trended for a few days when it dropped. And also, I think for the most part, the people who did watch it enjoyed it. So it's got that going for it. Do you want a Scott Pilgrim Takes Off season 2? Finally, on iTunes, Oppenheimer and Barbie are still on top, but now they're joined by Jim Carrey's The Grinch, while the animated Grinch is now also in the top 10. It was close for a couple of weeks, but now it's in it. Along with the holiday classic Rudolph. It's so interesting to see what people's favorite holiday entertainment is. I mean, of course, obviously there are far more movies than this, and I wonder if streaming is a factor. Although, at least the animated Grinch is available on Netflix. You just saw it on the Netflix chart. So maybe that's having a little bit of effect on some of these things as well. But, what are your favorite? What are your holiday favorites? What are your go-tos every year? And speaking of holiday movies, new one, The Holdovers, is doing very well, particularly for a smaller film. As for this coming weekend, Poor Things opens in somewhat limited release. And please note, for those of you considering seeing the film, I don't want to sway you in either direction. You're open to your own interpretation of it. But I do feel I should warn you that it really should be rated NC-17. As for streaming movies, on Friday, Netflix has Leave the World Behind, which is produced by the Obamas. And Peacock has The Monk movie for you Monk fans. Well, Prime Video, we have some holiday movies here with Merry Little Batman and then Disney Plus's Diary of a Wimpy Kid Christmas, Cabin Fever. With animation on Merry Little Batman looks so bad. And it's not even correct to the canon of the characters. I watched the trailer and I was annoyed. All right, I can see why it's not on Max. If they're shelving stuff over there, there's something for them to shelve. No offense to the people who made it. But it's kind of offensive to me. All right, with series, Coach Prime returns to Prime Video. How's that for synergy? On Thursday with season 2, while Netflix drops My Life with the Walter Boys. And then on Friday, Hulu debuts Culprits. What is all this stuff? All right, and so, we have a little bit of a lull here. And that's, unless you watch some of those shows. And that's this week's Movie Math. What have you been watching? What do you plan to watch? And what are your thoughts on Beyonce and Godzilla Minus One's box office? Share those thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.